Red Bull has just made a shocking decision, one that seems to only be making things worse, a decision that proves a recent quote from Jos Verstappen. It seems to me that Red Bull's period of dominance has come to an end. Might just be right after all. But what decision could they make that shows Verstappen Sr. is right? Well, that's resigning Perez for 2025 and opting out of Carlos Sainz. Could this be the biggest mistake Red Bull could make this year? After producing the most dominating season in F1 history last year, winning 21 of a possible 22 races, Red Bull was generally anticipated to cruise to another World Championship double in F1 2024. This would have swayed them to consider Perez again for the near future. After all, he isn't making life hard for Max Verstappen, which is just how Red Bull like to see it. But even though Verstappen has won 5 of the first 8 races of the new season, Ferrari and McLaren have boosted their performance in recent weeks, putting pressure on Red Bull. And this is not something you want if Perez is the second driver. Verstappen even had his most difficult weekend yet in Monaco, finishing 6th as Charles Leclerc claimed Ferrari's second victory of F1 2024, cutting the Dutchman's lead in the drivers' standings to 31 points, and Red Bull's lead down to a mere 24 points. Not all is lost yet for Red Bull, as recent tracks were a disadvantage for the RB20, but Jos sees the struggle. For sure there will be other tracks where Red Bull will do well again, but I am very curious to see how they will solve these problems, Jos Verstappen said. They will have to do something about it, understand where certain difficulties come from. Meanwhile, it is clear that McLaren and Ferrari are getting closer and closer. Max has been good at hiding some of the problems, but you can see how big the difference is between him and his teammate. It seems to me that Red Bull's period of dominance has come to an end. When asked about a hypothetical championship duel ahead of the Monaco Grand Prix, Verstappen Sr. claimed that Red Bull's recent success would make the team very tough to overcome in a straight battle for the World Championship. He told that, "Being at the front for quite a few years, and as a team, the way we operate, I think it can make a difference to teams that are trying to chase that. We just try to stay calm and collected. We know that over the last few races teams have been catching up or have beaten us, so of course we want to try and improve as well. But I do think with the experience that we've had over the last few years, it makes us a very tough team to beat in a championship because we don't make many mistakes. But even though they're tough to beat, there is still a lot going on behind the scenes, and Jos has noticed this as well. The team is in danger of falling apart. I was afraid of that earlier this year," he said. "For internal peace, it is important that key people stay on board. That is not the case now." Newey is leaving, and earlier this year it also looked like Helmut Marko, Red Bull advisor, would be sent away. For the future, that is not good. And now they've even decided that they're going into 2025 with the same driver lineup, making life possibly even harder next year. This decision has left Carlos Sainz out in the cold, and could come back to haunt Red Bull in 2025, don't you think? So, fresh off his 4th Formula 1 podium in 7 attempts in 2024, Carlos Sainz will have to accept the fact that, just as his current team will not have him, so will the other 2 teams towards the top of the grid that had potential vacancies. He will need to earn his fortune, in more ways than one, with either Audi Sauber or, surprisingly, Williams. Ferrari's switch in drivers for 2025 may have presented an opening for Red Bull or Mercedes, but neither are taking it. Red Bull plans to resign with Sergio Perez again in 2025, while Mercedes sees Formula 2 driver Kimi Antonelli as a clear priority above Sainz. One of these teams is acting unreasonable, and it is not the one anticipated to promote an 18-year-old. Sainz would score far more points for Mercedes than Antonelli in 2025, based on both F1 rookie history in general and the 2 drivers' individual experience levels. However, Mercedes appears to believe that Antonelli, 12 years younger than Sainz and a potential talent supernova, will bring the team additional trophies. It is, at the very least, a sensible set of goals for a team whose point total isn't very important right now and may not be in 2025. Red Bull's upcoming choice lacks grandiose long-term thought. The main justification for maintaining Perez is continuity, but that's also the main reason Red Bull shouldn't do it. Perez was an excellent match for Red Bull 22 and Red Bull 23, but those teams are not Red Bull 24, and perhaps his contract is intended to communicate the opposite idea. Red Bull is more vulnerable on the track. It is losing its design talisman and steering off course. The daring but uncertain future of a in-home-made engine arrives quickly. The prospect of a Max Verstappen breakaway appears unrestrained by any genuine contractual timeframes. Verstappen is unlikely to depart Red Bull in 2025, although it has been widely stated that he has the ability to leave whenever he chooses. It is far from certain that he will finish the 2027-28 seasons with Red Bull under his present deal. Verstappen put Red Bull on his back at Imola and, to a lesser extent, Monaco. Perez was not in his league on each occasion, but rather than both weekends being a slump, the prior 3 years show they were merely typical data points in the normal range of Perez's disadvantage to Verstappen. Red Bull's claim that Perez had improved his game earlier this year, as reported by Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, was implausible at the time and remains so now. He was, and remains, the same Red Bull driver he has always been. That was okay in a dominating Red Bull. Horner and Marko have never hidden their disinterest in seeing Perez push Verstappen, even on occasion. Better that he doesn't, given Verstappen's steady performance and big built-in advantage. However, while Verstappen stays steady, Perez's tendency to fall behind lowers Red Bull's performance floor. Their performance levels overlap very little, which is not the case with any of Red Bull's competitors' lineups. In Monaco, Oscar Piastri, who had started the season's second best to Lando Norris, stole a march on Norris and carried the McLaren torch. And, despite having a difficult weekend, Sainz recovered to race in tight assistance of Ferrari teammate Charles Leclerc, something Perez was unable to supply Verstappen at Imola. Sainz's time at McLaren, Ferrari and Toro Rosso as Verstappen's teammate implies that he will be the primary Red Bull driver on some weekends. Perhaps they would be uncommon and you'd bet on Verstappen to win the season. But is Red Bull really in a position to simply save itself the bother of optimizing its driver lineup? Is it pleasing Verstappen? Maybe, but Verstappen-Perez haven't always been the epitome of intra-team harmony. And in the aftermath of Monaco, Jos Verstappen fired a shot at Perez's performance, implying that at least some members of Verstappen's camp aren't convinced he's Max's ideal long-term teammate. And what if Verstappen does depart in 26? If that occurs with Sainz as his teammate, Red Bull will at least have performance insurance, knowing that whatever happens in the driver market, it will have a driver who will keep it in the running. It cannot be that certain with Perez right now. To add to this, earlier this year, Marko said that Perez's age, 34 years old, was weighing on him in terms of long-term planning. And there's clearly been some indications over the last year or so that Perez may no longer be at the pinnacle of his F1 career. Or at least a solid argument that Red Bull shouldn't expect to extract a much higher level out of him. Somehow, it has decided it can afford not to care and let Sainz go. So, despite being connected to Red Bull, Mercedes and Audi, it appears like Williams may sign the 3-time Grand Prix winner for the 2025 F1 Championship. The Mercedes-powered squad already has Alex Albon on its books for 2025, but they are thought to be looking for a significant signing to demonstrate the motor racing world that they mean business. While neither Williams nor Sainz have acknowledged or refuted the allegations, the Ferrari driver has spoken of a long-term initiative and building a team from the bottom. "My priority is to want to remain in F1, he said, but also to allow me to find a medium to long-term project where I feel valued, where I feel I'm being listened, where I feel like I can commit to a medium or longer term that is going to be useful for my career. I believe that just going to some places for 1-2 years and then leaving is not the right way to approach Formula One. If you look at successful winning teams, they've been built from the bottom and built a good thing together, and I believe in those things and I want to make sure I feel loved, valued, that I feel right at home." Channel 4's Stephen Jones jumped on the important phrases from the Spaniard's speech, claiming Sainz is locked in with Williams. "Very graceful, very classy. I expected nothing less," said Jones. Just after that interview, the rumours started to swirl that Sainz might be joining Williams. It's really interesting to hear him talk about a long-term project with a team. In short, he's going to Williams. It's locked in. What do you think? Will Sainz end up at Williams? And will denying Sainz come back to hurt Red Bull in the near future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.